The Utah Utes were dealt a major blow as they found out a key player would not be returning for the 2025 season. What does his absence mean? And how is Utah basketball going to go about constructing their 2025 roster under Alex Jensen? We'll tell you on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening, make sure you like and subscribe. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by the host of the Runnin Hoops Pod, Andre Crowley. Andrew, we'll get to a lot of basketball stuff that's going on, but we have to start with what happened with Dorian Singer last week. It's just been such a crazy news cycle we can get to talk about. There was a lot of hope that Dorian Singer would be able to return for what would have been his fifth year, but he's not going to be able to. This is a guy, he did crack over 600 yards last year. Actually, might have squeezed just past 700. So yeah, just over 702 yards. 700 yards with a dreadful quarterback situation. You thought him and Dampier could do a lot of big things. Unfortunately, doesn't end up working out that way, though, and he's going off to the NFL draft. This is definitely a loss for Utah. Would have clearly been this team's best receiver once again.
Yeah, no question. The JUCO ruling, right? Like that was what we were hoping was going to be the lifeline for Dorian Singer here at Utah. Just doesn't work out for him. Got Hunter Erickson an extra year, but doesn't get Dorian Singer an extra year. And I agree with you. You know, there's a lot of proving that now has to happen in that wide receiver room. You could have had a guy come back that was your guy that had a deep connection with Devin Dampier, but unfortunately, he moves on to the NFL, and hopefully we'll get to see him, saying, Dorian Singer, Utah in his player intro when he's on the field.
I would love to see that. I feel like he would claim Utah. USC, he had his most success with Arizona technically. So that's one of the interesting wrinkles of the portal era. Like what schools will guys end up claiming? It's we'll see how that part of it ends up working out. But yeah, Singer was incredibly productive last year. Just a guy you knew Utah could depend on. He came over. We mentioned a couple of the transfer spots too. I still remember the Arizona game against his former team, put this team on his back, 9 catches, 155 yards. The Oklahoma State game, he was massive as well. 7 catches for 95 yards. Had Cam Rising stayed healthy, I don't know if he would have been 1,000-yard receiver, Andrew, but I really think he would have knocked on the door. A guy who can run any route, stretch the defense out, a just true number one receiver, plays so hard, throws defenders off. Exactly the type of guy you want. And once again, him and Devin Dampier were childhood, like really close, like best friends. They had a really strong connection. It seemed like they were finally going to get to play together. So the fact that this isn't happening, and with wide receiver being the biggest question mark arguably on this roster, is definitely deflating and a loss.
Yeah, super disappointing, especially when you know that like a new offense is coming in and it's sort of a hope springs eternal right now with Devin Dampier, Wayshawn Parker, being able to retain a guy like Landon King who, is going to open things up for guys down the field by, going underneath. So super disappointing that we won't get to see, Dorian kind of get that one big season that I think he's really been in line for, but injuries and scheme and all of these other things just really didn't allow him to showcase everything that he was capable of at Utah.
They didn't. He had that one massive season with Arizona where he went over 1,000 yards and didn't even get over 300 with USC. Was just, sometimes guys transfer and it doesn't work out, but it was at Utah had the quarterback situation been better. So Dorian really has 3 years that pop off the page, but the one that definitely doesn't is the reason he did not have another year of eligibility. He used his freshman year. He played in 5 games, which is a bummer because he had 18 receptions for 301 yards. So just barely over the rule. So then the question like, hey, is this fair? Everything. I think there's 2 ways of looking at it. Number one, what you mentioned, that fact that they're giving the JUCO guys an extra year, but not the other guys. And that's all on the basis of Pavia, what he was pitching. Hey, I couldn't make the same amount of money I could. So I get that. But my argument to that would even be like, couldn't Dorian not make the same amount of money because he wasn't as good of a player as he was now? I am someone who, look, rules are rules. He played in his 5 games. So I feel for him, but I also understand the ruling. But at the same time, Andrew, all the reports are we're heading for a 5-year eligibility clock. It just starts, like, unless you get a medical red shirt, it's the only thing that would change that. So if we're heading for that, I feel like the NCAA just could have avoided a lawsuit by passing that now, rather than if they pass it a year from now, all the guys like a Dorian Singer who could have came back are just going to say, hey, we should have been able to do this. So it's a very messy situation.
Feels like a lawsuit waiting to happen, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Like missed wages and things like that. It almost feels like, and this is, I just was thinking about this, like it almost feels like these fifth years ought to be granted based on production, right? Like if you're a true freshman and you come in and you play well, great. But if you're a guy who, you wanted to see the field, but the numbers just weren't there. And how many times have we seen that at Utah with certain guys, coming in real heralded as freshmen, and then it's like, 18 receptions for 200 yards. Like maybe we should make these, eligibility things production based, and not necessarily, their clock or whatever, the number of games they play, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, then it becomes what's the number? Because he did go over 300. Right. He actually had more his freshman year in Arizona than he did with USC, which still just seems weird based on the year. 1 year he was coming off 1,000 yards versus the other was just a freshman coming into it. But what is that line? How does it look? So then also just becomes like, how do we feel about this 5-year eligibility clock? Here's what I stand on it. I just think they should give guys 5 years of eligibility with a red shirt, with a medical red shirt. I think you should cap it at 7. Like, hey, if you used all of that, then cap it. But we just had all these quarterbacks set these records because they got to play a 5th year. I absolutely feel like these guys should get the chance to, hey, even if you redshirt, you could still use a 5th year. So that's how I would edit it. But I do like the idea of a 5-year clock, just in terms of, like, you mentioned Hunter Erickson. Wait, he still has another year eligibility. Like, that's where this is getting out of hand. And I think a 5-year eligibility clock is a step in the right direction, even if I think there are still some tweaks that would make it better.
It's wild. Like in basketball, it's even worse. I don't know if you've been following the transfer portal super closely, but Matt Van Komen, who came in with Rylan Jones as a freshman at Utah, he's in the transfer portal. He's got another year of eligibility. I think he's closing in on Social Security. Kirk Carissa, who was at Arizona and then Kentucky, he's back at he has another one. He's got another one. Like all these guys, BYU's probably trying to dig one up for Trevin Nell. And so I agree with you, though. Back to the point, 5-year eligibility clock makes a lot of sense. I know it's something that Kyle Whittingham has been a big advocate of, and I think if we listen to Kyle, he has been on the forefront of just about every change that we've seen in college football, college athletics, whether it's name, image, likeness, super conferences, whatever. So if Kyle's saying 5 years, let's give him 5 years.
Yeah, hey, I'm always going to ride with Kyle, so I agree with you there. We do know, I will say, Rylan Jones is eligibility. That's one, like last year, I know he won it, and then he was at Stanford. He wasn't able to have the same level of success, but a heck of a career for him. Erickson's a wild one. I want to say he spent a year at BYU, then was at Salt Lake Community College. I actually called his games when it was there, and then goes to Utah for 2 years, I think it is, and maybe I missed something in between there too, but like that's the one where you're just trying to puzzle piece it together. Where does eligibility go? And I mean, even Lawson, has another year or two. There's just all these guys that feels like we're like, oh, Utah's going to lose so-and-so. Well, they're losing him because he's in the portal because he has another year. It's like, I didn't even know. Because it's so hard to keep track of. That's where really hoping that they can get a lot of this stuff under control and try to just put it under an umbrella where you can organize it more, have things more free-flowing. It sucks that Dorian got penalized for this. But Utah does have some other receivers. Receivers will not be the strength of this team, but they have plenty of guys who are capable of stepping up and contributing in what I expect to be a run-heavy offense. Because Utah has pretty much finished building their football roster, but they are far from building their basketball roster, even though they're already having some guys up on visits, which is a positive sign. We're going to talk about how we believe Alex Jensen is going to try and build this team and how we should build this team, we believe. We'll be discussing that in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at 5 Hour Energy. Are you looking for that extra boost to help you get through the day? That's where 5 Hour Energy comes up clutch. Daylight savings snuck up on us again. And if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament games, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy 5-hour energy, it gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up wherever you need. There's also just what I love about 5-hour energy is I've been staying up watching all the tournament madness, and 5-hour energy helps me stay with it. Also, just for those of you who have a busy schedule, long days, you're trying to get outside, go on a hike, tropical burst, it can give you that extra punch. They have so many different flavors. 5-hour energy does over 15, in fact. It's also that on-the-go convenience. Whether I'm at a game or traveling, 5-hour energy is easy to grab and keeps me feeling refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5-hour energy shot at your local grocery store or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized with 5-hour energy. You can find yours at your local grocery store or convenience store, or head to 5hourenergy.com to stock up today. Andrew, we're going to talk about some Utah basketball in a moment, but first, they did lose in the Crown tournament. Have to shout out Cheech. What an unbelievable run he had in Vegas. The fan who took social media by storm, screaming out, throwing off the free throws. Miro Little even pointed at him one time. He got interviewed by the TV crowd. Love seeing Utah fans get this spotlight, and Cheech absolutely earned it.
A star is born, right? I mean, that's what we had here. And the best part was he bought himself a courtside seat and nobody else was sitting by him. So it's just this one guy screaming at these Butler players while they're shooting free throws. Their big man, number 23, he missed all 5 of his free throws. Thad Matta shouted him out during like one of those timeout interview things. I mean, just fantastic. I don't know who's paying attention, but the Utah admin needs to get that guy to the Huntsman Center for some of the big games next year. That's for sure.
Absolutely. That's the type of passion Utah basketball is looking to bring back. And the Utah basketball season is officially over now. It feels like it's been over for a very long time, but it is finally over after the loss in the Crown. So now the Alex Jensen era gets underway. Alex is still coaching with the Dallas Mavericks, but you have Chilius, who's the assistant coach, and then Wes Wilcox as well, trying to build this roster. So what is this roster going to look like? Well, if we look back on what Alex Jensen said, he wants a roster that plays a tough, physical style because that's what the conference plays. He wants to play free, solid, hard defense too, and just stick to what they do. He talked about, hey, because of the portal era, you might change your identity a little bit each year, which makes me excited that, hey, he's not going to be rigid. Like, this is what we do. No, we'll maximize the players we get. But I love that he wants his guys to play free. I feel like that's a big thing that a lot of coaches, you see them try to play like too much in system and you can get into problematic situations. So I like Alex Jensen's vision, just like I have ever since he first took the job.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that fans have been kind of begging for a little bit. A return to the good old days of tough defense and rebounding and physicality. And I think this year's team did a good job with physicality. They just couldn't put together enough, good stretches of all 3 phases of the game, right? And so, looking forward, you've got 15 roster spots to fill for next year because it expands by 2 in basketball. And, you've got 80% of the roster in the transfer portal right now. And so, he's certainly got a big lift on his hands rebuilding this roster.
I feel like if this Utah team, and Jensen said, like, hey, I'm an NBA guy, so I want to bring guys in that fit that profile as well, which obviously is encouraging too. And he said his NBA journey will help him because he said the college game is becoming more professional. And he said still the most important thing these recruits and players are going to care about is, do you care about me? And do you know what you're talking about? And we know Alex Jensen, look, do I know for a fact, like, who cares about that part? Technically not, but based on the way he talks, like, this seems like a guy that raving reviews everything. I think he cares about his guys. And Andrew, I do know this, that man knows ball.
Oh yeah, 100%. He knows ball. And the 2 guys he's brought into as well, right? Coach Chilius has a resume of guys that he's put in the NBA as long as your forearm. And Wes Wilcox obviously has that front office experience as well. And so on paper, right, that trio that we have before we have any other assistants, that's a good trio to start with. And I think there was a video that the school put out where he was doing an interview with Bill Riley, where he just said kind of this thing of like, I know what it looks like, right? And I think that's half the battle when you're evaluating players. We're going to have well over 1,000 players in the transfer portal, high school guys, JUCO guys, international guys, and they've got to be able to make quick evaluations and quick decisions on a lot of these guys. And so being able to know what it looks like based on your experience is going to serve this staff really, really well, I think.
I absolutely think it will too. Just like I think having a GM and former NBA GM, he was with the Hawks, assistant GM with the Kings. Wes Wilcox edition is massive for this team because in Chilius, you mentioned another guy, elite talent evaluator. The guys that Utah have a proven track record of helping players succeed at a high level, which is something that, I mean, so does the fact that you have an NBA GM acting as Utah's college GM is still something that is just wild, but it leaves me so excited about the hands that the program is in to build out this roster and try to bring Utah basketball back to its glory.
Yeah, and it should make us all feel good that he feels like he's got a better chance to win in Salt Lake at the University of Utah than he does being with the Sacramento Kings, right? Because both have kind of been in basketball purgatory for a while.
Yes, they have.
And he's casting his lot with Alex Jensen and the Utes versus Sacramento. So that makes me feel good too.
I think I would as well. By the way, like just in terms like which franchise could be better move forward. Like, I feel good about the resources that have been reported with Utah versus if I'm at the Kings, I got to deal with the Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan thing. My best player just asked, I think I'd rather go to Utah too. But the fact that you still have a guy saying, hey, I'd rather go to college is still massive. Andrew, what's something that Alex Jensen has said that's really surprised you that has you excited about the future?
Oh man, I think one of the things that he said. I mentioned it a little bit already, just kind of that I know what it looks like. Because I think that we've had, 2 straight coaching staffs that have missed on a lot of on a lot of player evaluations. And so I think that's one thing. The other thing that he said that, and this may ruffle some feathers with fans, but he also said, I can't be Rick. Like I can't be Rick Majerus. That actually is encouraging to me, not because I think he's going to be soft on the players or anything like that, but I think that he understands the balance that you need in 2025 as a collegiate coach, even though the players are being paid. Like he's going to understand that balance that you need to have in order to get the most out of your guys. And, I know we're going to talk about some of the guys that are transferring out, but I think part of the reason that people got so frustrated with Craig Smith, among other things, is that he wasn't able to get the most out of some of these guys on a consistent basis. And so I think that for Alex, kind of understanding who he is as a coach and what he wants to do, I just think that that's a great place for him to start. And he doesn't have to come in and be Rick, and we shouldn't hold him to that standard either, right? Like he needs to come in, be his own guy, and sort of have this forward-thinking mentality, which I think he does. And I think it's gonna give Utah the best product that they possibly can get.
There's a lot of conversation in the NBA about, it's just like LeBron had a comment last week about like, oh, could this player play in this era? What would he do in this era? Rick Majerus coached in the right era. His style of coaching with today's athletes would not work at all. Phil Jackson is one of the best coaches in NBA history. Look, and a little bit of a different role for sure with the New York Knicks, but like that was a disaster when he was their executive because he was not equipped and ready to handle today's era. Rick Majerus is one of the best coaches and the best, obviously, that Utah's ever had, but it does feel like you need a different approach if you're going to succeed. And I love that he brought that up right away because, I mean, we both cover this team, so we're in the media in that way. Like, that's always something that falls wrong is like, hey, how do you balance that? It seems like he's going to take what he learned throughout his coaching tree and apply it to the modern athletes. And that, once again, just leaves me fired up about the future and that he is the right guy for this job.
Yeah, and there's an accountability aspect to it as well, right? Like, I don't think there's any question that the players liked playing for Craig, enjoyed him as a person, like we're very loyal to him. We're very sad to see him go. But I think when you're that far one way of being a player's coach, it makes it a little bit harder to hold people accountable the way that you need to. And then when they don't play, it doesn't make any sense to them. Right. And it doesn't make any sense to the fans, which, look, fans are fans, right? Like we're going to complain about a lot of things. But I think, within that team, you've got to be able to have some of that credibility to be like, okay, this is why your minutes are being reduced. I think that Alex is just going to be a better communicator that way and just a better leader that way. And again, that's not to deride Craig at all. Because like I said, I think the players really enjoyed playing for him, but it's going to be a different, a change of pace that this program has, desperately needed, I think, for almost a decade now.
They do. Feels like Craig's the right guy to do it, and incredibly excited and fired up about the next chapter of Utah basketball. But there are certain parts of the Craig Smith era, Keanu Dawes, that I would like to see continue with the Utah basketball program. But Dawes is in the portal. What does it look like? Can Utah bring him back? We will be discussing that in one moment. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. March Madness is heating up. We got the Final Four, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out. If you want to get on the action, head over to FanDuel because they're giving you a chance to get on the action like never before. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. You can pick your favorites. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year because it's not just for March Madness, of course. You get NBA, NHL, still got MLB, actually just starting up too. And FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. Staying in the action with the tournament games happening almost every day has never been easier too. With FanDuel, they keep you updated on everything. They're also easy and fast. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I get win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com, get in on the college hoop action all tournament long, whether it's college basketball, NHL, MLB, or the NBA, because we got the playoffs right around the corner for NBA too. Should be a really fun postseason. And Utah Hockey Club, their season winding down as well too. So excited to see what the future holds for them. Make sure you head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today. We got the Final Four, and if you want to know how it's all going to play out, make sure you check out the Bracket Breakdown.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, Andrew, looking ahead, some teams get the Final Four. Utah, like most teams, is in the transfer portal. Keanu Dawes is transferring. It hurts because to see him leave, but I will say he hasn't left yet. He entered the portal, played in the Crown, so clearly he likes Utah basketball. Based on some of the reporting, Alex Markham said, like, hey, this is a priority for Utah to bring back. I still feel like Utah has a shot to get Keanu Dawes back.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that they would have preferred to have him sort of locked up like they did with Caleb Lomu and Fano, right? They, in football, making sure they didn't get him to the portal. But, look, you got to do your due diligence if you're a player in today's transfer portal era and NIL era. And so I certainly think he's going to be a top priority. He's certainly played his way into, some pretty good compensation, I would think. And so, it'll be interesting to see what they do there, but I would imagine that Alex and the new staff will certainly try to put their best foot forward to bring KD back.
I mean, and when you call him KD, I mean, what a final performance fitting of that name against Butler. The 19 points, 11 boards too, 83% from the field, made all but one of his free throws. Like, he balled out to close the season. I mean, even just so many spectacular moments, even in the tournament against UCF, right? Like, has 21. Like, this is a guy that Utah has to do everything in their power to try and bring back. Him and Wallin are the top two guys. Ezra Sarr in there as well too. It just feels like that'll be a tougher one to get, but we'll see what they could do with Dawes. From a guy we want to see Utah to retain to another that it's probably in everyone's best interest if the partnership doesn't continue. Miro Little is also in the transfer portal. Alex Markham reported he was Utah's highest paid NIL player last year, which definitely stings considering when you look at what Little ended up averaging on the season. He was like 8th on the team in points per game at 5. Yes, he averaged 3 assists per game, but I could still remember, Andrew, I got a big, long enough memory, all the excitement when Utah landed Miro Little. And this happens a lot in the portal. And we just mentioned some misses in the Craig Smith era. Miro Little was one of them. I feel like it's best for everyone to move on. Still think Miro can be a productive player, but probably not going to be at Utah.
Yeah, Miro, had a little bit of a tough ride at Utah. It's one of those things where it's kind of interesting because a lot of the guys that they brought in this past offseason through the transfer portal were guys that they recruited out of high school, like Miro, like KD, like Zach Keller. And, maybe they were sort of caught thinking that this was the same player that had that 4-star evaluation. He was stuck behind some really good guys at Baylor, but, it just never came together for him consistently at Utah. And, when you've had to replace a guy like Raleigh Wooster or a guy like Davon Smith, those are big shoes to fill in terms of playing the point guard position. And I think it's one of the main reasons why this team struggled so much. They didn't have a true point guard. They didn't have consistent play out of their backcourt. Obviously they've got a ton of roster spots to fill, but I think that, getting that ball dominant point guard is got to be priority number 1, 2, or 3 for them. And, Miro just never quite put it together this season for Utah.
Utah never quite put it together either. That's the goal next year, is to put it together better. Alex Jensen doing everything he can in the portal right now. Figures to be, or his assistants, I should say, as I mentioned. Jensen is still finishing the season with the Mavericks, which, Andrew, really quick, I love that. If you're going to come in and preach to your guys, loyalty, finishing out the job, all of that. I have no problem with a coach who leaves a team, but I do like it when they finish out the season because they preach to their guys being all in, then you leave and you get better offer. Like that's part of the game. Just finish it out with them. So I like that Jensen is going about this the right way.
Yeah, and it certainly helps that he got Coach Chilius and Wes Wilcox in place almost immediately. I think that was the big concern from a, kind of a fan perspective was, okay, well, if Alex is finishing out the year in Dallas, and we know they're going to give him plenty of room to, do the things that he needs to run his program here. But if he's going to do that, then he's got to have people in place. He's got to have boots on the ground. He's got that, right? Coach Chilius has been, getting these guys on campus for visits, reaching out to guys in the portal. We've seen a lot of contacts there. High school guys are getting reoffered. So, the work is being done, and it allows Alex to sort of end his time in Dallas on a positive note rather than sort of just one other person that jumped ship, for the Mavericks this year.
Yeah, because there's going to be a lot that by the end of the year probably do it. None bigger than Luka, of course. So, it's rough being a Mavs fan. Future seems bright being a Utah basketball fan. Andrew, if people want to track all the movement that goes on with this Utah team, where they need to head over to?
Yeah, just give me a follow over on the socials at Runnin Hoops, and then check out the Runnin Hoops podcast wherever you get a podcast. Right after you're done listening to Locked On Utes, just flip it over to Runnin Hoops, and we'll be covering this entire off season as much as we can. Try to get you all of the latest from the portal, from high school, from JUCO, and hopefully we'll get some of these assistants on the show as well as the months drag on here and we get into the summertime.
Andrew, appreciate making the time.
Yeah, thank you.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you tomorrow, breaking down the latest in Utah football, Utah basketball, Utah recruiting, and Utah athletics. Hope you'll join us then.